There are rules in every family. Don't leave your wet towel on the floor. No TV until your homework is done. Normal things. In my family, we had all of those, plus one more. One rule that was absolute, unspoken, and enforced with a silent, terrifying finality. You do not go into mom and dad's bedroom. It wasn't just a knock-first situation. The door was always locked. I was never, ever, for any reason, allowed inside. Not to ask a question, not to retrieve a stray toy that had rolled under the door. That room was a fortress, and for my parents, I was an invader. And from as far back as my memory goes, I knew why I wanted to go in. It was the knocking. It wasn't a constant sound. It was subtle, a soft, rhythmic thump, 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 that you could only hear if you were standing in the hallway right outside their door. It came from inside, from the far wall of their room, the one that backed up against the old linen closet. I first noticed it when I was maybe 6 or 7. I thought it was the pipes, but the sound was too steady, too intentional. The curiosity of every child is a powerful force. A few times I found the door unlocked by mistake. I'd sneak in, the thick carpet muffling my footsteps. The room was always dim, the heavy curtains drawn. It smelled of my mom's faint lavender perfume and my dad's cedarwood aftershave. It was just a normal bedroom. A big bed, a dresser, a tall, imposing wooden wardrobe against the far wall. And when I got close to that wardrobe, the sound was clearer. Thump, thump, thump. It was coming from behind it, from inside the wall. I always got caught. It was like my mother had a sixth sense. I'd be in there for less than a minute and I'd hear her footsteps in the hall. The look on her face wasn't just anger. It was a deep, primal panic, a terror that made her features sharp and strange. The punishments were swift and severe. No TV, no friends, grounded for weeks. My dad would handle the lectures, his voice a low, cold monotone that was far scarier than yelling. There are places in this house that are ours, and ours alone. You will respect that, or you will find yourself respecting nothing at all. As a teenager, I tried a different approach and thought that direct confrontation will do the thing. I asked them at the dinner table one night, "Why can't I go in your room? And what's that knocking sound I always hear?" Silence. The clinking of cutlery on plates stopped. My dad slowly put his fork down and leveled a gaze at me that was as hard and cold as granite. My mom just stared at her plate, her knuckles white where she gripped her knife. "There is no knocking sound," my dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And you will drop this. This is the last time we will ever speak of it. If you mention it again, or if I find out you have tried to enter our room again, the consequences will be something you cannot begin to imagine. Am I understood?" I understood. I dropped it, but I never forgot. My mother's behavior only deepened the mystery. She was a good mom, loving in her own distant way. She went to work, she cooked, she cleaned. But any free time she had, she spent in that room. She'd disappear behind that locked door for hours on end. Sometimes I'd press my ear to the door and just listen. I never heard a TV or music, just a profound, heavy silence, occasionally punctuated by her soft humming a tune with no melody, or the faint sound of her whispering to someone who never whispered back. Now I'm 21. I've saved up enough from my part-time job to finally get my own place, a tiny apartment across town. I'm leaving, and a single, overwhelming thought has dominated my mind for weeks. It's now or never. I can't leave this house without knowing. This secret has been a silent third parent to me my entire life. A ghost at every family dinner, a shadow in every hallway. I have to cast the light on it before I go. I told my dad I was ready to move out. He was relieved. That's the only word for it. There was no sadness, just a weary sense of relief. He and my mom wished me luck, told me they were proud. I asked him, one last time, my voice trembling slightly, "Dad, before I go, please, just tell me what's in the room." His face hardened instantly. The mask of the proud father fell away, revealing the cold, stern guardian of the secret. "Your new life begins when you walk out that door," he said. "What is in this house is part of your old one. You will leave it behind. Do you understand me? You will leave it all behind." That was his final answer, and it was my final motivation. I spent my last night packing my bags, a hollow feeling in my chest. The next morning, I watched from my bedroom window as their cars pulled out of the driveway, one after the other, on their way to work. The house was finally mine. My heart was a frantic bird in my ribs. I walked to the kitchen, to the old ceramic cookie jar shaped like a smiling pig. It was where they'd always kept the spare keys. I reached inside, my fingers closing around a single cold brass key, the key to their room. I stood before their door, the key trembling in my hand. It slid into the lock with a well-oiled click. I turned it, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The room was exactly as I remembered it. Dim, still, smelling of lavender and cedar. The big, dark wardrobe stood like a monolith against the far wall. And as I crept closer, I heard it, clearer than ever before. Thump, thump, thump. It was a slow, weak, but steady rhythm, a sound of flesh on wood. I knelt down, pressing my ear against the cold plaster of the wall, right beside the wardrobe. The sound was right there on the other side. My own breathing was loud in my ears. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I just needed to prove to myself that I wasn't insane. I spoke to the wall, my voice a choked whisper. "Hello? Is someone there?" The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was so absolute it felt like a pressure against my eardrums. I waited. Nothing. I was about to stand up, to write it off as the house settling, when a sound came back through the wall. It was a voice, a faint, dry, rasping sound. A feminine voice, stretched and thin, like a recording played on dying batteries. It spoke in broken, staggered syllables. I jerked back as if I'd been burned. I scrambled away from the wall, my mind refusing to process the words. Kill me. I must have misheard. It had to be something else. But the voice came again, a little stronger this time, a desperate, scratching plea. Kill me, please. This was real. There was someone in the wall, a prisoner. My mind went to a dark place, thinking my parents were monsters, that they had someone locked away. I looked at the wardrobe. It wasn't just against the wall. It was clearly, deliberately, blocking something. My system was flooded by the adrenaline. I grabbed the sides of the heavy wardrobe and pulled. It was old, solid wood, and it barely budged. I grunted, dug my heels in, and pulled with every ounce of strength I had, my muscles screaming in protest. It moved, scraping and groaning across the floor, inch by agonizing inch. Behind it, where there should have been a plain wall, there was a door. It was a small, simple wooden door, painted the same color as the walls, designed to be invisible. It had a simple brass knob, but no keyhole. It wasn't locked. I could enter. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. It was cold. I turned it, pulled, and the door swung open with a low, mournful creak, revealing a sliver of darkness beyond. I pushed it open the rest of the way. The space behind it was small, no bigger than a closet. It was a room, a hidden, secret room. It was filled with the clutter of a life I'd never known. Tiny dresses hanging from a single hook. A small, dusty mobile with faded pastel animals. A stack of photo albums. I picked one up. On the cover, in my mother's handwriting, it just said, "Our Angel." I opened it. The photos were of my parents, younger, happier, their faces bright with a joy I had never seen in them. And in their arms, they were holding a baby with a wisp of dark hair and my father's eyes. In the center of the small, cramped room was a makeshift altar, a small wooden table, covered in a white lace cloth, now yellowed with age. It was surrounded by dozens of candles, some new, some burned down to melted stubs of wax. And on the altar, lying on a small silk pillow, I saw it. It was the baby from the photos, but it wasn't a baby anymore. It was a thing. Its body was small, shrunken, and desiccated, mummified. Its skin was a pale, translucent parchment stretched tight over a tiny bird-like skeleton. Its eyes were closed, its mouth a tiny black O in its shrunken face. It was horrific. A tiny, preserved corpse displayed like a holy relic. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to touch it. A pull, a need to connect with this impossible, tragic thing. I reached out a shaking hand and gently, so gently, laid my fingertips on its cold, dry forehead. And the world exploded. I saw visions, memories, and pictures that are not my own. All flooded my mind with the force of a tidal wave. I saw a sterile white hospital room, my mother sobbing, her face buried in my father's chest. A doctor with a grim face saying the words, "I'm so sorry. There was nothing more we could do. Your daughter is gone." I saw my parents in their bedroom, the one I stood in now. They were holding the tiny, still body of their daughter, wrapped in a hospital blanket. My father, with a face covered by a mask of desperate, insane grief, was drawing a circle on the floor with red chalk. "We can bring her back," he was whispering. His voice was a frantic prayer. "The book said we could. We just have to anchor her, give her a vessel to stay in." I saw them place the tiny body in the center of the circle on the altar. I saw them kneeling, chanting words from a language that made my teeth ache. I saw the candles flicker and die, and a coldness fill the room as the tiny body on the altar twitched just once. And I felt her spirit, trapped, snatched back from the peace of oblivion and slammed back into her dead, decaying shell. I felt her confusion, her terror, her unending, eternal suffering. A conscious mind, growing, learning, trapped in an inert, unchanging prison of flesh, unable to move, unable to speak, able to do nothing but feel the slow, inexorable passage of decades and knock, knock, knock on the silent wall of their bedroom. And through it all, I heard her voice as a clear, soul-shattering scream inside my own head. "Please kill me." I ripped my hand away, stumbling back, a strangled sob tearing from my throat. I finally understood. My parents weren't monsters, not in the way I'd thought. They were just broken, drowned in a grief so profound they had committed an atrocity to try and escape it. They hadn't imprisoned a stranger. They had imprisoned their own daughter, my sister. I knew what I had to do. There was no other choice. I grabbed an old soft blanket from the foot of their bed, returned to the hidden room, and carefully, reverently, wrapped the tiny, mummified body. It was as light as a bundle of dry leaves. I put it in my duffel bag on top of my clothes. I took one last look at the sad, terrible little room, and then I walked out. I didn't close the hidden door. I didn't move the wardrobe back. I wanted them to know. I left the key on the kitchen table, walked out the front door, and never looked back. The drive was a blur. The visions didn't stop. I felt her gratitude, a wave of pure, beautiful relief, but it was tangled with the agony of her long imprisonment. I felt her pain, her loneliness, her terror, and I felt my parents' grief, a crushing, unending weight. I drove for hours until the city was a distant memory, until I was on a lonely road surrounded by nothing but fields and rust. I found what I was looking for, a desolate, abandoned scrapyard. There, among the mountains of rusted metal and broken dreams, I built a small pyre. I unwrapped my sister's body one last time, whispered an apology for my parents, for my own ignorance, for her entire stolen life. I laid her on the pyre, doused it in lighter fluid, and with a flick of a match, I set her free. I watched as the flames consumed her, and as her tiny earthly prison turned to ash, I cried. I cried for the sister I never knew. I cried for the parents I could never go back to. I cried because I had done the most merciful thing I could imagine, and it was also the most monstrous. They'll come home. They'll see the open door. They'll know what I've done. They will hate me. They will despise me for taking away the one thing they had left of her, even if it was a perversion of her memory. I freed my sister, but I destroyed my family, and I don't know how I'm supposed to live with that.